Hey everyone, welcome to Now Valley Diorama. In this video, I'm going to take you through a plastic kit I'm going to put together. It's a roadside diner, and I'm just going to go through the procedure, a couple of little modifications I did on the entry here, and I'll show you the colours that I chose to paint it. So let's get started. So let's have a look at what's in the box. And you should always check the box because sometimes little pieces may break off and you don't want to lose those. I love the texture of this building. You can see there, it's just so realistic with the stone on the bottom and the rendered sandy finish on the top half. And some of the roof items that go on the roof. Window glass. Now these are interesting. These are the seat/booths that go inside. So I'll decide on a colour to paint those, and that'll be a nice feature, having such open windows. And the floor. And the roof. One little modification I'd like to make is the entrance at the sides here. I'd like to change and make a grand entrance right in the centre. I'll get to that pretty soon, but first I want to clean up some of the edges on the parts. Little dags of plastic that you all know about. I've got myself a file set. I think they are diamond. Give that a little rub and it knocks the plastic down really easily. All parts seem to have some sort of little imperfection. I'm keeping in mind I will be photographing this model when it's finished, so I like to take care of the finer details. I'd like to put a little bit of a brick edge or a brick join on this top edge here, just under the windowsill. So I'll get another one of my files out of my sets. This one is a triangle shape, which has like a sharp angle, so it's only going to give me a fine line when I file the plastic. And there we go, that's all it needs, just a little bit, so it makes it look like a real brick. I bought a set of these magnetic clamps. They're pretty handy. I've set this one at the moment to 90 degrees, but it's easy to adjust to any angle. There's the screw there that clamps it. They are very handy. These plastic parts are so small and so lightweight. I find as soon as you touch them, they move and bump in the wrong place. So as you can see, a magnet on each side of each wall holds it at 90 degrees and position it exactly how you want it before you add any glue. These are the two parts that form the front window that I was going to modify. They go right there. And instead of using those, I'm going to put together these two doors that were to go to the side at the front. This is blue tack I'm using to help me hold things temporarily in place. It's a tacky little chewing gum type texture thing. It's designed to hold posters on the wall and stuff like that. Okay, so to get the right distance, I have to keep in mind the roof line. I've got to stay within that, and that's going to determine what size or what length walls I need to cut to come out from the sides. So I'm going to make that 17 millimeters. And to get it square, I use the grid pattern on my cutting board. That's always a good, accurate guide. And I always mark the offcut, because this will be cut with a Dremel, and I want to keep the saw blade on the offcut side of the piece. And I was so grateful that this piece I cut in half was long enough to fit on both sides of my model. You got to be lucky sometimes. Here's another good use for the square grid on your cutting board. Gluing little pieces like this together can be 90 degrees. So the window fits on the model like this, and I'm going to use the height of the window to determine the height of the piece of wall that I make for this length here. Using some styrene, I'll mark the height of the window, score it a couple of times with a nice sharp knife, and then it will snap along that scored line. Easy. Sometimes I mark things straight from the model without the use of a ruler or anything. That's pretty accurate doing it that way too. Some of these little pieces, when you're gluing them together, are very small and fiddly. I found a cheap, easy way to do this is to get your ruler, hold it there in an upright position and place the plastic against it. It only takes a few seconds for the glue to hold, and there we go. Beautifully plumb. And the window will fit against it nicely too. I'll need to modify the floor as well, because as you can see, there are some steps now that are in the wrong position, but that's not a problem. I can grind those off easy. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey Wayne, you've got a hole in your floor, but it's okay. It's on the outside of the building, and what I plan to do is to cut out a section and make it a garden. Some sort of greenery anyway. That'll fix it, and same on the other side. Now I've noticed the front doors are the full height of the walls of the building, and what I'd like to do is grind them down a little bit or sand them down so they have a little gap underneath them. I'm at the stage where I'd like to paint this now. I have some surface primer loaded into my spray gun, and I'll give it a light dusting. I've heard this MIG ammo paint needs to be just painted a light dust coat over the surface first, and that gives it a good key to stick for the rest of the coats. Since the windows are so big in this model, the windows at the front at least, I'll paint the inside because I think you'll see in at least a little bit. I gave them a coat of white as well, along with the ceiling, and remember to wash your airbrush out thoroughly. I normally just squirt some water in there, give it a swish around with the brush that comes with it. You'll need to add fresh water, squirt it out until the water is clear. While I'm giving the paint a chance to dry, I'll have a look at other parts of the model. I'm looking at the roof, and these things here, they're sticking up a bit too much for me, a bit too industrial. So I'll see what I can do to modify those. When you look at the roof, it still has the markings on it where they should be positioned, but I thought I would use some of my scrap styrene and make a similar size panel, but something flatter that looks a bit more like, I don't know, solar panels, for example. So I'll mark them to length, cut them off, and see how they look on the roof. And I'm thinking they look a bit too flat like that. I'd like them to stand up off the roof a little bit, to have a little gap under them. So I might pack them up with either 1 or 2 thicknesses of styrene, which I will cut smaller than the top panel, so there is a lip overhanging all the way around. And I like to round off the corners a little bit too, just to take that sharp edge off them. I decided to go with 2 thicknesses of packing underneath, so I'll glue those together first. And once they're all glued together, I'll glue them on top of the roof. Line it up so it's as straight as possible, and put some pressure on it as well so those 2 pieces get mashed together while the glue melts the plastic. So there you go, that's how it looks now. I'm much happier with the results, way less industrial, and I might make those solar panels, I think. The two circles that are on the roof are for chimneys. I'll keep those because in a kitchen you'd imagine there would be some sort of an exhaust system. These are the lights I'm going to add to the ceiling. It's probably going to be way too bright, but with this type you can dim them. I wanted the room to look like it's lit the entire width of the whole building, so that's why I went with this particular light. But just before I do that, I might do some painting so I don't have wires hanging around and getting in the way. This edge here and underneath where the fascia would sort of go and gutter, I'd like to paint that a green, I think. So I've got myself some blue paint, some yellow paint, and when I mix the right amounts together, I'll be able to come up with the exact green that I need. Now, so I don't forget what I've done, I've decided to keep a record of all my paint mixes. I call this Cafe Green, and it's just a matter of taking note how many drops of each to make up the colour. Here's a handy tip that some of you may not know. If you get yourself some yellow, blue and red paint along with black and white, you can make just about any colour on the colour chart, except for metallic. Again, I know what you're thinking. Hey Wayne, that's a pretty darn ugly green, but I'm hoping when it dries, it dulls down a little bit. So we'll see. Now remember before I said this MIG ammo paint needs to be painted on very, very lightly so it sticks properly. This is what happens. The paint sort of separates itself like it's an oily surface, which it probably is slightly too on the plastic. You can't blame the paint for everything, but I've found when you give it the second coat, it's all good. It covers well. When the paint dries, it loses its shine and it dries a matte finish. And what I'd like to do is bring back a little bit of shine to make it look like it's a steel fascia. So I've got some satin paint here, clear. I'll go over it with a couple of coats. I want to show you the cable that I use to do the lighting on my diorama. This is basically a data cable, sort of like phone cable. You might have a piece of it plugged into your computer at the moment to connect to the internet. And when you strip the outer insulation off, you expose all these tiny wires inside. There's 4 pair altogether. And when you separate them, you get 8 strands of very fine wire. I don't know technically that this is the right size for what I'm doing, but it seems to be okay to me so far with a 12-volt system. To give you a proper idea of the size or the gauge of the wire, it measures about 0.5 millimetre in diameter. And when you include the insulation, it's about 0.9 of a millimetre thick. I store mine wrapped around this piece of PVC pipe. It makes it easy to get to, it's not tangled up. I like it. The thing I like about it as well is it's a single strand copper wire that's easy to bend and it holds its shape very well, so you can fit it around all your obstacles on your model. Okay, enough talking, let's do some more work. Remember the light strip I'm going to use? I'm going to put that right across the centre of the whole building. Cut myself a piece of wire that's the right length. I don't have black and red colours, but here in Australia, brown is active and blue is neutral. The back of these LED strips have a sticky tab on them, but I find in some cases it's not sticky enough. I like to add an extra length of double-sided tape, and that seems to hold a lot better. Here's the part where you get to bend the wire and it actually stays in its bent position. Very, very handy for hiding the wires. So I'll test these lights to make sure my connections were successful. Here's my 12-volt power supply, nothing out of the ordinary. What I've done, I've cut the end off the lead and stripped the other end and added some connectors, and that allows me to put the active and neutral wires into those connectors and see if the lights work. Perfect. As I said before, they're going to be way too bright, but I wanted the building to be lit from one side to the other, and I'll just put a dimmer on them to make brightness suitable. To hold the wires in place, I squirt a bit of hot glue on there, and that seems to do the trick. I wish it wasn't so messy. We're down on my diorama now, and as you can see, I'm in the very early stages, but I'm looking forward to seeing what the lights look like. And as I thought, they are too bright. But if I adjust the camera settings, that sort of dims the lights as well. So that's going to be a bit more of a realistic glow from the building when it's got its dimmer on. Okay, enough talking. What I'd like to do now is paint these bricks that are on the bottom half of the walls. And I'll start with painting the joins. And I've chosen a dark brown colour called Dark Tracks. I like to use my spoon to drip the paint into because it just creates a little puddle in the middle and it doesn't waste so much paint by spreading it all over the place. Here I'm not trying to achieve a fantastic paint job, I'm just trying to work it all right into the joins so we don't have any undercoat showing at all in the joins. They'll show up as white patches and really stand out when it's finished. I've temporarily fixed the base down onto a piece of cardboard with some blue tack just to hold the walls a little bit more firm for me until the painting's finished. The brick colours that I'm going with are a light brown and a grey, and I'll load the brush with paint but wipe most of it off too, so it just has a light hint of colour over the top rather than filling up the joins. I don't want to touch the joins at all. And I don't want the bricks to look too dark either. So I might swap this light brown earth colour with a brighter yellow sandy sort of colour. We'll see how that looks. It's looking a bit like a spotty giraffe or something at the moment, but I'm not worried yet, I'll keep persevering. And now for the grey colour. I'm going to change to a smaller paintbrush, and what I'd like to do is try and colour each tile or each brick its own colour, just to try and make it look a bit more like a clean ceramic tile rather than a natural stone block. We'll see how we go. The finished product doesn't look like anything I originally thought of, but these bright colours up the top here, I wanted it to have the look of it being from the 1980s. A nice, bright, open, airy sort of diner. The windows I will keep white, and I'll glue those in position now. So to do that, I'm going to scratch off a little bit of the paint, or all of the paint. So plastic contacts plastic, and it's just a matter of scraping it with a knife gently. It'll come off. I'm just gluing the windows in place now. And here's a good example of how much the plastic melts when you add the glue to it. You can really see it actually welds the two pieces together. Very, very strong. I'll need to leave it a bit longer till it sets before I can actually clean it up. Well, this video is probably long enough now. You get a good idea of what I'm doing here. Just to skip forward a little bit, the base used to be a square edge on this front edge here. I cut that out. I also cut out a hole in the middle here, which I'll make a garden as it gets put into the layout. And I did exactly the same on the other end here too, so it matches. Next, I'll just do some weathering. The solar panels that I've got on the roof, they need a little bit more work. I'll put some edging around those just to tidy up the edges. As I said, do a little bit of weathering and you should be ready to go on the layout. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. One of the difficulties I have is choosing colours. I think colour is an important thing to make things either look good or, not so good. But anyway, that's a decision we all make. So thanks again for watching. Subscribe to my channel, that would be appreciated, and we'll see you in the next video.